Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Agile Time Machine. Today, we are talking about how a group of people, which is meeting for maybe the first time, starts to become a team, starts to perform, what science has to say about this process, and also what you as a team lead, manager, facilitator, or as a team member can do in order to help the process to go through. So let's start with a little history lesson and going into 1950, 60 and 70, where a bunch of psychologists started to observe how teams are forming. And they, in particular, there was a guy called Tuckman. He was a psychologist, and mid of 1960s, around 1965, he wrote a book about team building and group dynamics. And yeah, he recognized that if a team meets or if people meet for the first time, they are going often through 5 different phases. First, they start to meet each other and start to greet and say hello and introduce themselves. And he described this very early phase as the forming phase. It is characterized that people are not giving too much information away, that there's, let's say, very little trust in the group, and so on and so forth. So it's very early days, of course. And in the next phase, the team starts to storm. So having conflicts, negotiating who's taking which role in the group, or identifying roles which are required. And at the same time, they also storm and conflict around the task at hand. So what is it really about? How would you try to do it is also already maybe being addressed. But at the end of the day, it's a bit chaotic and things need a little bit of time in order to settle. Once that has happened, the settling process, norming will start as the third phase. Norming means people are have accepted the rules, have accepted and agreed on what the task at hand is, and then they really start to identify how they will work together. So maybe writing rules down or codices or definitions of done, which tools they are using, etc. So this is then done in the third phase. In the fourth phase, this is where the performing happens. So all the ground rules are completely done and dusted. Rules are done and dusted. The roles are identified. The task is clear. And now it's really the question how to optimally execute on the task and also on new tasks coming in. Overall, this is the core of the Tuckman model. There is a fifth phase he added in the 1970s, which is the adjoining phase. So when people are leaving the team or when the whole group dissolves. And that phase is also important. It needs to be celebrated as such and recognized. We come to that in a second when we talk about how a team lead can help with the different phases. Eventually, what happens also when a team member leaves or a new team member joins is that this process repeats. Yeah, not maybe in the same order of magnitude, but there is really the same 4 phases are re-executed every time you change the team constitution, and it is probably having an impact on the team's performance as you're adding new people. Tuckman wasn't the only guy who wrote about how teams form and prepared models for it. There are 3 other guys, and I have to read their names. So Bals and Strottbeck, Lacousier and Gersig. These were the 3 models I found on the internet. There's a link in the description which gives you an overview. It's in German, so you have to use Google Translate if you don't like it. But at the end of the day, Tuckman is the most appropriate model to use for work organizations. Even Tuckman himself used often nurse groups when he was observing how things were going. So groups in hospitals forming. Also, they are quite a narrow group of people he was able to observe. I think it was 55 people at the end of the day. But it's good enough on the one hand. And secondly, over the last 40, 50 years, since the model was founded, it has been proved over and over again in real life examples. In the 70s, for instance, a group of people started to develop a course in Germany, which is called Group Dynamics. And I went to this course myself, and you can observe as an observer as well as a participant of this course that people follow pretty much, if they are not given any guidance from the outside, pretty much follow the 4 phases. Yeah, we always meet and greet. We always try to identify what the task at hand is. We start to negotiate and conflict, and then at the end, when we have agreed, when we have found our roles, then we start to perform. So I think it's good enough to use it really as a very well-founded hypothesis for our work lives, that teams which are meeting for the first time, or teams which are done with this process and get a new person in or have a person leaving, that the team has to go through aspects of these 4 or 5 phases again. The team lead or facilitator, let's say we have maybe a scrum master, maybe we have a team lead, maybe we have a team coach, whatever the person is who's sort of more responsible for the social interaction between the team members, or let's say the structures which influence these interactions. This person can, of course, make sure that the infrastructure is available. That can mean time, that can mean rooms, that can also mean allowance essentially for a certain amount of argumentation and conflict, which is healthy, and also recognizing when it's not healthy any longer and when he needs to intervene. What kinds of things does the team need in terms of information in order to be clear about what the task at hand could be, or the roles are in the team or hierarchies around them. So these things is something the team lead and facilitator can make sure, and of course a lot of observing and then finding out what the team in this particular moment in time requires, and eventually also recognizing when the own contribution is not any longer required and when he can go a bit more distant to the team as the team has reached the performing phase and is able to sort out any kind of problems themselves and still be available, nevertheless, if the team reaches out for help. So that's for the team lead. We have the team member. In my eyes, it's good to know that this process exists because it helps to calm down when it gets a bit more heated. At the same time, taking it for granted that this process needs to happen and that it needs to happen every time. If I think about myself, I can get quite impatient when things which are crystal clear to me need to be redefined, written down, etc., etc. But it is something which is really required for a group of people to come to this joint understanding of the topic at hand, because for every individual in the group, something else might be crystal clear. So it is good to know that this process exists. There is not so much you can do about it actually in order to make it faster. Be open for it, be open for what comes, and rest assured at the end of the day, it should happen that you're reaching the performing phase and things are getting better. At the end, there's also the question of why is this somehow connected to Agile? And I was on a fair 10-ish years back in Bonn, and a PhD in psychology, he had a little workshop and he introduced us to the Tuckman model on the one hand, but he also introduced us to how Scrum can actually facilitate the process as a structure. So when I spoke about the team lead, Scrum master, or facilitator providing infrastructure or structures in order to help this process, in his eyes, in this psychology guy eyes, the Scrum model was giving a certain amount of security or information and transparency around how the team is supposed to work. Daily stand-ups, sprint planning, sprint review, sprint retrospectives, backlog refinement, and duration of a sprint. These are very visible in your calendar, and it's also something which is easy to visualize. So these are very, very visible structures which help a team to have a smoother run through the whole process. Because if a team member arrives and he knows how Scrum is working, or even if he doesn't, but it's very clear for the team to explain to this person how they interact, what are the core structures. This is why Agile and the whole group dynamics topic does overlap, because at the end of the day, these structures facilitate the process. What means facilitate the process? It means the team comes faster from a not so productive time into the productive performing area of their group dynamics and group development. That's all I have to say for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope there was something helpful for you in there. As said, there is a link in the comments about the other models out there and the comparison a little bit of the four. Thanks again and see you soon. Bye.